I'd love to say this story was a joke because honestly, it has everything. Hot fuzz energy, peak nanny state hysteria, and the best part, the poor guy looks like the front man of Green Day.
They're the same picture.
But I want to emphasize I'm not laughing at him or what has happened to him, but the sheer absurdity that this has happened. The Guardian has the story of a man in Manchester, a theatre technician, who was arrested by armed police because he walked home from his allotment with vegetables, a few tools in his belt, and a tragic case of wearing khaki in public. Now, I know what you're thinking. He must have been threatening someone. He must have been acting suspiciously. He must have at least looked dangerous. Nope, he was trimming his hedge. Now, before I get into this, have a think about liking or subscribing. It really helps me out, especially in these early days. So, let me set the scene. Samuel Rowe, 35, comes home from his allotment with a trunk full of veg and a couple gardening tools, a Japanese sickle, and a hori hori trowel, tucked neatly into their branded pouches. He decides to quickly tidy his hedge before heading in, but then someone sees him and calls the police. Not just any police turn up, armed police. He hears shouting, turns around, and the next thing he knows, he's cuffed, slammed up against his own home, and cast off in the back of a van. So, what was the problem? Apparently, a member of the public saw a man wearing khaki and in possession of a knife, which, in modern Britain, is apparently enough to initiate a full tactical response. He wasn't even waving the tools around, he was just wearing them. The police officer apparently didn't even understand what allotment was and actually pulled out the trowel and said, "That's not a garden tool." Which, do we need to start issuing RHS membership as part of police training? Because here's what gets me about this story. He isn't just some wild troublemaker or dangerous criminal. It's a young man, he's 35, quietly coming home from his allotment, something which exists in every corner of this country, just doing something that most adults should be able to do. Hey, maybe it's something that you do. Tending to nature, growing food, living a little bit closer to the earth. I mean, he was keeping his hedge tidy. The clue was in the hedge. If he'd been holding a hedge trimmer, would that have been somehow less alarming or just more recognizable? Sure, maybe to a city dweller who's never had a garden, a Japanese sickle might look a little medieval. But that's not a crime, that's a lack of garden literacy. And the police, they didn't just overreact, they doubled down. Instead of popping round to reassure the neighbour that it was just Sam with his turnips, they arrested him like a flight risk. That's what ignorance and overreaction really looks like. Taking a grown man with a trug of vegetables and a few classic gardening tools and treating him like a threat. Not because he was doing anything wrong, but because the people in charge didn't understand his life. Gardening, allotments, tools made from a simpler time and now back to being part of modern life. But just because you're a threat doesn't mean that you won't be treated like one. In a culture this twitchy, all it takes is one person panicking, and suddenly you're in handcuffs for owning a trowel. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised the Chelsea Flower Show is deemed a new terror cell of Britain. Here's something that gets me though, because the police have computers, right? They could have looked up the word allotment and hori hori trowel. They could have searched a map for their local patch of where the allotments were situated. They could have sought to verify his story. The UK has centuries of allotment culture, dig for victory, actual wartime posters of women with wheelbarrows. And now, we're arresting people for trimming their hedge with the traditional Japanese garden tool? The sheer disconnect between the average modern urbanite and the tools that built their own grandparents' lives is alarming. Honestly, I daren't ask Greater Manchester Police who their number one most wanted man is. But if I was Alan Titchmarsh, I wouldn't be planning a trip up north anytime soon. And this is where I think the story gets a bit darker. Because this man, he was polite, calm, kind. He answered questions honestly, including whether he was autistic or had ever served in the army. Why those questions were relevant, I have no idea. He tried to make himself seem small, harmless. He even said he was trying to ingratiate himself to the officers, because he knew that his freedom depended on whether they thought he was being reasonable. And in the end, they gave him a conditional caution, a formal mark on his record, something that shows up on DBS checks. He works with vulnerable adults. This could genuinely ruin his job prospects. All because he didn't want to leave his tools in a flimsy shed. And for some mistaken reason, that made him an easy target. Was it the car key? The politeness, the way he didn't resist? The less threatening he became, the more they seemed to double down. And I do wonder, if he'd said he had been in the army, would they have treated him even more suspiciously? We live in a country where some people fall through every net and go on to commit horrific acts. I get the possible outcomes, but once checked, this was not in that category. It's frankly baffling. And I swear, Manchester police must get so twitchy whenever Gardener's World comes on the TV. Like every time Monty Don kneels down with a trowel, somewhere a CCTV operator hits the panic button. And look, this story is funny. The absurdity of it. A police officer denying a gardening trowel is a gardening tool. Armed police pitching up because he was trimming his hedge. It's hysterical. I have to be honest, I cried laughing when I first read it. But underneath the laughter is something else. Because this story doesn't just reveal it doesn't reveal a culture that doesn't recognize gardening tools. It reveals a culture that doesn't feel safe. We are a nation on edge, always watching, always nervous about what or who might be the next threat. This week marked the 1 year anniversary of the Southport stabbings, a location only an hour or so from where Samuel's story took place. Every day we hear news of stabbings, theft, street violence, and random acts of horror. And we've become so collectively traumatized that a man in khaki holding a Japanese sickle could be mistaken as a potential killer. And I understand it. People want to be vigilant. They should be aware we are living in scary times, but that's what makes this so heartbreaking because Samuel wasn't skulking down an alley with a machete. He's a theatre technician coming home from his allotment, doing something wholesome and ordinary, and now he has a criminal record because someone couldn't separate fear from fact. And it's not just a funny headline anymore. It's a glimpse into a Britain that's lost the ability to tell the difference between danger and dignity. And that's what really gets me. Because, yeah, the story's funny, but it's also the state punishing a man for being a gardener who wants to use a traditional tool. If this is where we are, where owning gardening tools gets you arrested, where tending your allotment and taking your tools home with you gets you interrogated, then how far are we from raiding garden centres, from needing a permit to harvest your own flippin' tomatoes? And here's one more thing that sticks with me. We don't even know who called the police. We don't know who looked out of their window, saw a man carrying veg and trimming a hedge, and saw danger. And that's just part of the tragedy of modern life, isn't it? Because a generation ago they might have known him. But now, we don't know our neighbours. We don't notice the people on our street, or worse, we don't trust them. And instead of familiarity, we feel fear. And sadly, it's not just our neighbours, it's the police too. We used to have officers who would actually walk the beats, who knew the people on their streets, who'd have looked at Sam and knew he was just coming back from his allotment. But now we've got officers who need the word allotment explained to them. How can you live in Britain and not know what an allotment is? That's not just sad, that's cultural decay. We are so far removed from the rhythms of land, food, and labour, and yet we wonder why everything feels so fake, flat, and empty. So, what is the takeaway here? Don't wear khaki in Manchester? No. This is what happens when you make a population dependent, passive, and afraid. You get a society that doesn't recognise different rhythms of people's lives. We're so nervous now, so on edge, haunted by headlines that we haven't even fully processed. This story isn't just a misunderstanding, it's a perfect little microcosm of how allergic we've become to self-sufficiency. We've lost the plot and the planting schedule. So let me know what you think of Samuel's story below, and as always, have a think about liking and subscribing. Thank you so much.